When this came out, I thought I was going to be able to pace myself and not watch this all in one day, but no, I watched it all in one day. Stranger Things has been great so far. Season 1 was very nostalgic, reminded me of E.T. and The Goonies, a lot of Steven Spielberg, a lot of Stephen King. And then Season 2, the show kind of came into its own with more monsters, more sci-fi, more emotion, more action. And Season 3, again, brings a lot of that stuff. This time, the kids are on summer vacation, and they're just having a normal life, they're in relationships, they have jobs. But a new creature comes to wreak havoc on Hawkins, and so the group has to come back together to help stop this threat. I would say overall, I really enjoyed this season. It was fun, but I would still say Season 2 is better. I think this has a lot of what the series is known for, adds some new things, but certain parts to me weren't as well done as it was in previous seasons. I did a poll on Twitter to see if you all would rather me do this full spoilers or spoiler-free, and full spoilers won, but I do want to give my general thoughts for the people who may not have finished the season yet or are thinking about starting it, and then I will get into spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, click away after the spoiler-free part, but don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Alright, let's get into it. So what worked? Stranger Things is nothing without the characters, and of course, we have great characters again this season. We have the characters that we've known since Season 1, like Mike and Eleven, and Lucas, Dustin, Will, and now we also have some new characters joining, like Robin and Alexei, and then some supporting characters that weren't as big in previous seasons but have more of a lead role in this season, which would be Erica, Lucas's little sister. One of the great things about watching this show from the start is that you get to see these kids grow up and develop as characters, as people. You see how the relationships change as they grow older, and you'll see how they take on these different challenges. They've been through a lot of traumatic stuff to this point, but they continue to find ways to overcome these challenges, beat these monsters, save the world every time, and that's what I think really keeps you coming back to watch this show. And what I think was kind of smart about this season is that instead of trying to get them all in one place for the whole time, you see some of them kind of split off into different groups. You see certain characters interacting that weren't interacting with each other as much in previous seasons, which I think worked a lot. For example, we see Dustin off on an adventure with Robin, the new character, and Steve Harrington, along with Erica. And that group is doing one thing, and then you see Mike, Lucas, and Will doing one thing. Jonathan and Nancy have their own mission, and Hopper and Joyce also have stuff to do. So it seems like in this season, especially towards the first half, each character kind of has their own part to play in the overall story, which I thought worked well. And then as it goes on, you do see some of them come together again as the big group that we know and love. But it is nice to see some of them take on different aspects of the story and see how they all kind of start in different places but slowly lead back to each other. Now that being said, I do think, seeing as there's a lot of characters to balance, I think some characters got the short end of the stick. But overall, I would say you still get to see the dynamics that we've seen developing over the series. You see how they've become such a family because of these shared traumatic events. So I think it still overall has that feel that we've had since the beginning. Another great thing about the season was the horror elements. The monster itself was very creepy, kind of disgusting at times. And that also made this season as a whole a lot more gruesome than previous seasons. But I loved the action. I loved the fight scenes that they did have with the monsters. Sometimes though it did get repetitive of Eleven just walking in and like using her telekinesis and just like throwing the monsters left and right. And of course the season has a lot of emotion. You root for these characters, you care for them, you hope they make it out of this in one piece. And when things happen to them, it hurts sometimes. You see them get hurt, you see them fighting for their lives. You're on the edge of your seat, and I think that tension is really what keeps you really invested in the show, along with just the personalities of these characters, but also just trying to watch them and hope that they survive. So what could have been better? Again, I like the monster that was in the season. I did think it was very creepy and gruesome, but I think the story surrounding it could have been a little bit better. It's not that it was bad, but I think it just didn't come together nicely as Season 2 did. I think the connections between the characters and how each of their separate missions came together at the end, I don't think that worked necessarily as well as it did in Season 2. And I don't want to get too much into spoilers at this point, but I think with little work it may have flowed together a little bit better, but the monster itself, I think, was menacing. Lastly, I'm just going to say it. I think this should have been the final season. I think the story would have been a good conclusion to Stranger Things as a whole. I thought the character arcs ended at a good place. I think that the dynamics of what was happening was good. And with the little tweaks to the ending, this could have been a great conclusion to the series. Now, I can tell, especially by how they ended this season, that there probably is going to be a season 4 still, and I think they said they're working on it. But I do hope that they're not just milking it at this point, that there is actually still story to tell there, which there kind of is, but I just am worried they might stretch it too far, so we'll have to wait and see. Alright, before I get into spoilers, the verdict. I think the season was a good time. Again, I didn't enjoy it as much as season 2, but I still think it's a good watch. Very easy to binge. Again, I watched it in one day. So if you find yourself not doing anything, you have a day off, you're just chilling, just watch Stranger Things Season 3. It's a good time. A lot of great action, a lot of great character moments, and it's just a good time. Alright, let's get into spoilers. So if you have not finished Stranger Things Season 3, click away right now. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright, spoiler talk. First thing, I don't think Hopper is dead. Besides the American line, I think there's one part where they intentionally showed the Russians disintegrating from the explosion, but they purposely did not show Hopper disintegrating, and I think that is because he either escaped, someone saved him at the last second, maybe he got transported into the Upside Down through that portal before it closed. I don't know how, but I think some way he is not dead, because I feel like that was just too... I can't even put it into words. I think something's just off about it. Like, they would have really shown it. I think they would have shown him disintegrating if it was actually him dying. So I just don't think he's dead. I think somehow he's going to come back. I don't know how, but I feel like they would not let David Harbour out of this that easy. So we'll see. Next, Joyce and Will. I think their arcs in this story were a little, I don't want to say forced, but you could tell they didn't have as much to do in this season because, one, the monster was not actually attacking Will this time. It was actually going after Billy. So Will, first of all, his arc did make sense to a point. Of course, he lost out on a lot of his childhood because he was both missing and then possessed. So he didn't get to grow up with his friends as much. So that storyline, I think, worked, where you see him kind of having a crisis that his friends are kind of leaving him behind. They're growing up without him almost. So that part was fine. But then when it came to the monster, all he did was just touch his neck to sense it. I would have wanted to see him maybe get, like, full powers or something as a result of the stuff that's happened to him. Like 11. Maybe not fully like 11, but something that was a little more useful than just having, like, a upside-down Spidey sense. So there's that. And then Joyce, I feel like her story didn't lead into the bigger mission as well as previous seasons. At first, it started with her just freaking out over her magnets not sticking to things, and that, I think, was just not as interesting at first. I mean, the science behind it, I guess, was cool, but then I feel like in previous seasons it was better where she actually had a legit concern, and people were thinking she was crazy, but this season I feel like they didn't give her as much to do, in the beginning at least, but then as they get more into the mission and figuring out what the Russians are doing, then I think it starts to pick up, but in the very beginning, I wasn't totally sold on the magnets thing. Alright, the relationship between Robin and Steve, I thought that was really well done, especially in the bathroom scene where Robin comes out to Steve and Steve totally accepts it. He doesn't have like this, he doesn't like treat her differently or anything, which I think is a testament to how much he's grown as a character. Because if it was the jerk Steve from season 1, he definitely would have made a big deal of it. But this Steve is more mature. He's been through a lot also like these other characters, but I think he's grown a lot as a person, and so it's nice to see that he's able to still be friends with Robin even though they actually can't have a relationship like that. But I thought that was a sweet moment. Alexei was one of the show stealers, I think, of this season. Again, this show does really well is that it gets you to care about all the characters, even the ones you don't think you're going to care about as much at first. Alexei, one, didn't even understand him because he spoke Russian the whole time, but you still care for him. The part that really hit was when they're in the amusement park, and he proves, what's his name? Maury wrong. He's like, Maury believed that all the games are rigged and that there's no way for you to win, really. Or if you do win, it's a setup. But Alexei proves him wrong, and then you see his happiness when he wins a prize, and it's a wholesome moment. And then as soon as he wins, bam, he gets shot, and then he's dead. And I think that just one of those moments where that really ripped your heart out. Like, you just really feel all the pain of what just happened. And I think that's what, one, the show did well, and so I think it was a great addition. I think Alexei was great for the show. Added a lot of comedy, too, the way he played off Maury and Hopper and Joyce. But then, as an individual, I think he just brought a lot of charm and wholesomeness to the show. Even though he technically was part of the enemy group, I think he was a nice surprise. And the monster. All right. So I couldn't really get into too much detail with it in my spoiler-free section of this video. But I think it was cool seeing... Well, not cool, but I thought it was interesting how, since it was controlling Billy, you did get to see some of Billy's past and see some of Billy's trauma. But then, ultimately, it's just Billy was walking around recruiting people to turn into zombies, I guess. And then at the end, they all kind of like turn into goo and form a big monster. But I don't think that was fully explained necessarily, or the consequences of that weren't fully fleshed out. So these people are pretty much dead, but I don't know if the show really confirms that necessarily. Like, you don't see people mourning the ones that have been lost to this, well, I'm going to call it the goo monster. And then after a certain point, too, it just seemed like the monster was just chasing them around, and that was it. I mean, I don't feel like there was as much emotional investment as it was when the Mind Flayer specifically was under or controlling Will. I thought that was a lot more tension, a lot creepier, and a lot more suspenseful than this one, because it's just the monster chasing them around like a regular monster movie. Speaking of which, it actually reminds me also, Susie and Dustin's song. I think this is also one of those controversial moments of the show, like that 11 episode last season. I didn't hate it, but I could see why people might not like it. I think what saved that scene for me was seeing the other characters' reactions to Dustin and Susie singing this song in the middle of a crisis. Like, I was definitely screaming at the screen, like, what are you doing? We don't have time for this. But again, it makes sense because they're kids, and so a kid would be like, no, you have to do this before I can help you. So that part made sense, but it just was kind of weird that we get to this one point where it's very suspenseful, where the monster's chasing them, where Maury, Joyce, and Hopper are like about to get attacked by Russians, and then it just stops for this song. That part was kind of weird, but I think what saved it was, again, the comedy of the situation, that everybody's looking around like, what is going on? Why are they singing? And then after that, further down, like in the end of the episode, you see, or not the end of the episode, the end of the season, you see Lucas and Max making fun of Dustin for that, and I guess the whole group probably makes fun of him for that. So it does have a payoff, but again, it did feel weird when it happened. So have you seen Stranger Things 3? What did you think? Let me know down in the comments. Also, don't forget to share this video, like, and subscribe. I will see you in the next one.